So I want to claim the credit for the least branding on my slides. And the reason for the least branding is I'm wearing several hats here today. I guess the first hat I'm wearing is as the chairman of the Network Operator Council of the NFV ISG, so thanks for that introduction, of which I claim some notoriety as I initiated and founded it, and it's grown into quite a monster. The hat that I'm wearing is as the editor of the latest white paper from the operators, making some commentary on the progress in the industry on NFV. And I guess there's a kind of third hat I wear, which is my own personal hat. You'll notice I didn't mention BT in any of it, but of course I'm working for BT and I head up a small but very, very beautifully formed innovation team in BT. It's interesting to come back to the Broadband World Forum after about 8 years of being away. When I was first here, I worked not far away from Jeremy Steventon-Barnes, I see in the audience from BT Wholesale, talking about our fibre to the home and fibre to the cabinet trials. And we were very proud of those. And today, of course, those are all very writ large over there. What I didn't expect 8 years ago was to come back and tell this community how their world is going to disappear into the cloud. And that much of what you see out there on the exhibition floor in 5 years will look very different. And it's going to look very different because this is what's going to happen to it. And the most interesting and stimulating presentation I've seen over the last couple of days was Vinay Banai's presentation from PayPal yesterday. Vinay, sorry to talk about you right here, but moved from Adtran to PayPal, and it was a transition I recognised because at the beginning of my career, I moved from being an electronics guy to being a computing guy, and then I went back to being a network guy. And then Vinay has moved to PayPal, where he's taken all of his network expertise and he's showing PayPal how they can reduce the functionality of all of their top-of-rack switches to almost nothing, because all of the intelligence control is going to be in the software environment. And that, to me, is the essence of what NFV is all about, is to say that everything that is a bespoke appliance in networks today, potentially at least outside of the core, where terabits per second routing is absolutely necessary and will need to scale even further. Everything outside of that high throughput, very concentrated domain is going to be virtualized. And so I don't need to talk to you too much about the benefits, but BT, I'm very proud of my team. We were the first telco to publish hard numbers. Peter Willis, who's in my team, stood up in a conference about 18 months ago and talked about that we discovered, I use the word discovered, that basically network functions can be implemented on an industry standard server with sufficient throughput to do packet processing at the rates necessary for network workloads. And we published those results. In addition, we did a total cost of ownership model. At the same time, BT, we don't do research anymore without costs, benefits being analysed at the same time, to showing very significant benefits, which I don't need to build on what Brian has said from Juniper. They're well understood now what the benefits of virtualization are. But for example, 50% energy reduction is an interesting one for any of us that are interested in sustainability. And I guess the one that really gets it for me is the ability to scale in, scale out, trade workloads in the cloud environment in the way that the cloud guys know well. We in networks don't know that well because we're used to a box being the scale. You scale, you add more boxes, right? And then in 18 months, they're all obsolete. You have to change them all out again. And then you have to rewrite all our OSS code. So it's a horrible, horrible domain. It's going to be fixed by NFV. Potted history, really just basically I edited the first white paper. We had 13 signatories to that. And really what it was saying is, this is ready, guys. We need to get on with this. We need to identify the common approaches that we need to talk to the industry about and to get scale in innovation in an open ecosystem. So it's about encouraging an open ecosystem. It's not actually about standards. Standards are absolutely vital and necessary. We want to call the ones out that exist. We want to incrementally build on the ones that don't exist and move forward into interoperable environment. So we founded the ETSI NFV ISG. We had our first meeting in January this year, and already it's grown to 152 companies including 28 service providers and the cable industry, all very determined not to create new standards, but to signal to the industry that NFV is the future. So we're signalling, and we're also using our joint influence to give the industry confidence that we're talking with the same language, about the same things, and we want common approaches so that the likes of Juniper, Cyan, Sienna, all of you guys who are going to be talking later on, can sell to us, all of us, and we actually understand what it is we're buying from you. So those are the kind of things. We published our first results last week. Those of you that were at the SDN and OpenFlow World Congress will have heard this story already. We've published a set of use cases which have been designed to span the scope of the NFV ISG. They're not exhaustive, but for example, on the screen at the bottom right-hand side, there is an access use case. And when I introduced the idea that we could virtualize access to some of my access colleagues, they said, you can't virtualize access. It's a piece of wire, it's a piece of fiber. Well, we're not going to virtualize a piece of wire, a piece of fiber. But everything else that sits above the physical layer, potentially above layer 2, fits into the cloud, right? And I've had that story played back to me today in a private meeting with a big vendor in a way that I never expected. They found insights that I didn't even know that justify virtualization of access in the way that the radio guys have known for a while. So that's why in maybe next year, the year after, this conference is going to look very different. Because Vinay's top-of-rack switches with almost no functionality is where I want the access network to be. So second NFV white paper was published, which basically brought attention mainly to the outputs of the ETSI NFV ISG, but also we were asked by vendors to provide some direction. You know, what do you feel are the next steps for the industry? So that white paper is available on the ETSI website, and you'll notice that this time we've grown to 25 signatories. Now, collecting signatories isn't the objective here. The objective here is to say that those telcos, you'll see very significant names in terms of equipment volumes on there. There's at least one who's not even a member of the ETSI NFV ISG. So that's the significance of NFV for the industry. Some of the key messages that I'll just quickly skip through, so we'll try and catch up some time. The ETSI NFV ISG is I guess the significance of it is that the number of operators that are working together there. So these are the innovation leaders within this operator community. These are the guys that are at the bleeding edge inside their organizations in terms of where does the future for our networks go. So we are representative of the innovation community, but we are also influential on strategy. So when you see those names, you don't necessarily conclude that there is an executive buy-in at some very high level to a significant wholesale change-up. This is to tell you that this approach, we agree from the innovation perspective that this is the approach that the industry is going to follow. And we will use our influence in the appropriate places to help the industry get those common approaches and the open ecosystem. And Brian, I congratulate you on that open ecosystem that you talked about, because we don't really know how this ecosystem is going to develop. Because today we buy these bespoke network boxes from very large-scale vendors who give us the best in class at any particular moment in time, but not necessarily an openness that we would need. So the likes of Juniper, Alcatel, all the others I know are very keen to help us understand that you can have an open ecosystem coming through network equipment vendors that understand our world. Right? So integrating an architectural framework with constituents from different solution providers is key. We want to, and this is basically the statements coming from the white paper. So you can read the slides, read the white paper. These are verbatim. These have been agreed. The wording has been very carefully crafted to be consensus. I'm not changing the wording on here. These are the words of 25 service providers, including the cable labs of the cable industry. We want to avoid a protracted standards effort. So that's one key message from us, right? We want to reuse existing standards where they exist. we don't know exactly where all the gaps are. So having published our first set of outputs, one of which is an important document called terminology, right? When we came to this, nobody heard of network functions virtualization. In fact, we invented the term in a meeting in Paris last June. I know because Peter Willis and Product and Verizon came up with it. We coined that term because we wanted to be very clear, because nobody knew what network virtualization was. But network functions virtualization is very clear. So we said, okay, so now what we want to do is we provide a common terminology, which means that we speak each other's language. And then when it comes to language, what's a test of a good definition? Well, Dominique Delisle from France Telecom had a great test. If I can translate it into French and back to English, and it has the same meaning, it's a good definition. So I'll leave that one to take away. That's Dominique Delisle at France Telecom who gave me that one. Open and source initiatives are complementary. Open source stimulates a lot of emotion, right? We are not saying that open source is the answer. We are saying that open source is complementary and to existing standards routes. But we don't fully understand where open source plays. There are some obvious places it plays. So we're planning to have an industry workshop around open source. And now I'm beginning to give you a clue about what comes after the NFV ISG, because we sunset in 2014, and we are starting to have parallel dialogue with the industry in places that are important in order to hand over the baton when we're done. We can't just throw it over the wall. We want to bring the industry with us. That's the whole point of the ISG. Bring the industry with us, have the industry totally understand it. In our organizations, in our telecoms organizations, we understand it, so then we start to pull the solutions into our domain, so you can start to monetize those. It's pretty obvious to me that once you convert networks to software, everything that you've built protocols for in the past have to be questioned. Everything that you've done to architect networks in the past have to be questioned. So the clean slate approach I don't believe in. I like the idea, but we have to build on legacy. We have to build on those existing infrastructures that we have and then incrementally update them. Eventually, we will morph to this new world. It will be a journey, and you'll hear some of that from some of the other speakers. So that means actually academia, who started out on the SDN journey a while ago, we're encouraging them to do new research to help us in this domain. There's a statement in the white paper on OSS. It's a very significant statement. And the wording took several days to agree between the operators, because we want to be very careful that the messaging here could be signed up to by every network operator. And that was a challenge, because every operator has a different view of how this monster called OSS will evolve. And they didn't want messages out that might be subverting existing OSS dialogue that they may be having with their suppliers. Finally, I'm not only a collaboration animal, and I saw Balin there, for example, on the podium in the keynote. Balin and I founded another forum many years ago, 2000, called the Full Service VDSL Committee. And Jeremy, that was the committee on which your deployments of BT Wholesale have come from. And Balin was at the time CTO of US West. And now I see he's CTO of Liberty Global. Didn't get a chance to talk to him because I came to this. But that's how showing you how full circle, we're coming back to where the fundamentals are, which is that if you can do things in software, why would you do them in hardware? If you can do something in software on an industry standard platform, why would you buy a bespoke box to do that? It's so obvious, to anybody that understands computing, but it's not obvious to networks people. So that's the key why this conference is very interesting, because watch this conference, because when the networks guys start to get it, your agenda is going to change dramatically, and congratulate you on having this track. But implementation is where I come from. So I've always worked on applied research. The first thing I do is I prototype something and I play with it. And when I prototyped, or my team prototyped with Intel, HP, Wind River, TLF, our first POC, we had a lot of fun doing that. But I also knew that Verizon had another POC that was in the same lab. In fact, it was in the rack next door in HP's Plano, Texas facility. I didn't know what it was doing, but all I knew was it looked the same. So my use case was the same as theirs. And therein again was homogeneity, despite the fact that the rumors were that Verizon were doing something complementary to what we were doing. We were doing performance tests. They were doing orchestration tests. So I thought, how do we bring the two together? How can I get their learning? I've got 5 guys. How can I multiply the learning? I can multiply the learning by getting the industry to prototype for me. So the NFV ISG started out actually with this as its fundamental aim. Not to do standards, but to do industry-wide implementation where I could learn from China Telecom's activities. I could learn from PayPal's activities, from France Telecom's activities. So we put out a call for proof of concepts. It's a very low bar. We went into a deep dive on what are the criteria, and we soon realized that we would have impossibility to judge. So we said the simple criteria are that there need to be at least 2 vendors working together and at least 1 operator. And you should target your use case, your POC proposal on the work of the ISG, not that the work of the ISG is unique, but it has all of the challenges documented quite well. And then to have public demonstrations and the public publication of results within the lifetime of our body, which is about to the end of next year. And my final conclusion is we encourage that. Welcome participation. I'd love to see some broadband access use cases presented at next year's conference. And if you want more information, there's some links there for you. So thank you very much.